Success is not just about making your mark in the world, but also about leaving a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more. John Quincy Adams. You have the power to be the boss of your own life. I'm your host, Monica Allen. I'm a wife, mom, entrepreneur, best-selling author, lifelong learner, and your biz bestie. I have a love and passion for all things small business. Growing my own company from $700 to over 7 figures annually, my goal is to bring you inspiration, business-focused topics and tips, encouragement, and a community that helps you launch, grow, and scale your business, whether you are a dreamer, a side hustler, or a seasoned entrepreneur. You are listening to the Become Your Own Boss podcast. This month, our company Zeus's Closet celebrates 15 years of serving the Atlanta community. 15 years. In honor of this milestone, we're inviting you to make some new memories with us. For the entire month, we're offering a heartfelt 15% off any business order placed with Zeus's Closet. It's our way of saying thank you for being an essential part of our story and helping us reach this remarkable milestone. Simply redeem by mentioning 15 years strong when you place your order via email or in person. You can browse our catalog by visiting Zeus'sCloset.com, and that's ZEUS Closet.com. Whether you're looking to unite your team, impress clients, or simply elevate your business's brand, our customized apparel and promotional products are the perfect way to make a statement. You can also purchase our small business package and save 15% by using this promo code at checkout. The past several weeks of the Kickstart Your Business series was fun and hopefully helpful, but I'm excited to get back into my interviews with some amazing entrepreneurs. On today's episode, I'm joined by a guest of resilience, passion, and a legacy of soul food that transcends generations. My guest today chose a path in the field of education, earning degrees from Norfolk State, Johns Hopkins, and Georgia State Universities. When the pandemic posed a challenge, she, alongside her husband, fired up their entrepreneurial spirit, opening the first Atlanta location of a restaurant that's a nod to family legacy and culinary excellence. They have since expanded to 2 locations. Co-owner of Delilah's Everyday Soul, Delana Winder Reeves has gone from a successful career in education to full-time entrepreneurship in the restaurant industry. Even though I have known Delana for a number of years, even I did not know her full story, and I cannot wait for you to hear it and be inspired. Check out my conversation with Delana. Well, Delana, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited for this conversation.
The same. I've been looking forward to it, actually.
Yay. Well, I'm going to tell just a little bit of background, and then I'll let you take over. But I've known Delana for several years, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to her is because Delana was in education for, I'll let her tell you how many years, and she has since moved over into the world of entrepreneurship, and I am so excited for her. And I'm going to let you, Delana, tell people about your business because it's the bomb. But first, just tell us a little bit about your background in education and what made you pivot into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, pivot is such a great word. But Monica, first, thank you. I am really excited to join you today and to talk with you. I have been listening to your podcast. I started it in January. We went on vacation, which we don't really get to do. And I was on the beach and I started listening to your podcast. I started at the beginning. So I'm like, I think episode 69. So I'm almost, wow. I started at the beginning. So it is really nice to hear, kind of reflect on those COVID times, right? And like all that happened and the big pivot. I still consider myself to be an educator. I was in education formally for almost 29 years. It is a huge part of who I am. But with that, most of what I'm doing now in my business really, I've been reflecting on this. It's like all of the steps that I've taken in life have really helped to prepare me for this time and space that I'm in now. I didn't enter education to become a school leader. That was not my goal. A lot of people do go into that field with the hopes of becoming a principal, et cetera. That was not my goal. My goal was around, I love children, I love people, and I love education. And I grew up in an amazing elementary school. The school where I ended reminded me so much of the school that I went to in Philadelphia, and that's what attracted me there. But I have always been the person to want to help people like get it, like whatever that it is, right? Not that I have all the answers, but like I like helping people like in that way. Being now in the restaurant industry full time, all of the skills that I've developed over the years, now I'm using and have helped me. And I quite honestly was not ready before. I grew up in the restaurant business. Now, as an adult and as a grown woman, I have so much appreciation for my mom. As a child, I didn't.
Most of us didn't.
I didn't. You know, I'm an only child. I was envious in many ways of my mom's business because it took her time, right? And it took her time like away from me. My mom opened, which in reflection is a pretty like remarkable story. My mom was a computer programmer for IBM. She had a very traditional, conservative, highly structured job and profession. And you know my mom, but
Yes.
for the listeners, that is not who she is in any way, shape, or form.
Nope.
She is very creative. She actually went to school for interior design, still around that creative realm, but she landed in this position with IBM. And as a small child, we always ate like whole foods. I was not the child that like grew up on processed or fast foods. On Saturdays, we would go to the farmer's market, which was the Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia. And that's where we bought all of our produce, all of our meats. We had our milk delivered, like all of that stuff that you can kind of think about. I grew up in a family of cooks, not just my mom, my grandparents, like on both sides, like they were cooks. So I grew up in that. In this farmer's market, there was a stand that my mom frequented, and it was a pastry shop. The lady who owned the shop made the decision that she was ready to retire. And she told my mom, like, you know, I know you come here, but I'm not going to be here much longer. And they had a conversation about it. And my mom ended up getting that stand. And that was her first location in 1984. She was the first African-American and woman to open a stand in the Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And I was 8 years old. Not only did that change her life, but it also changed my life. I grew up in the city, and I would walk from my elementary school about 10 blocks to where the Reading Terminal was after school, and that's where I worked. I joke that that's why I'm so good with math and counting, because my job was to run the cash register when I got out of school. That's what I did. And because I grew up in the business and I was required to work in the business, I didn't really enjoy it because I felt like not only did it take my mom's time, but it took my time. Like I had to work there on the weekends and, you know, all of the things, right? But what I later learned was that was also a step for me, because I learned and watched, like, not just my mom, but others like that she had in management, how they interacted with staff, watch how connected she was, like, to her staff. And we actually had a joke about this last week because I would ask her, like, well, why are you doing that for that person? Like, da 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 da. But now that we have our own staff, like, you do become very attached to one another, right? That's your external family, especially in a small business. There was a point in my mom's career where she decided she was ready to retire. And as an only child and someone who knew the business really well, she came to me and said, like, I want you to take over the business. And there were 6 locations at that time. And one was a full-scale bar, restaurant, lounge. I was the general manager of Bluezettes, was the name of it, for 5 years, simultaneously whilst teaching when I lived in Philadelphia. Complete burnout.
Yes.
And I was basically like, I will never, ever, ever, like, do that again. I'm over it. Like, it's too much. It requires too much from you. But I will also say my children were very young at the time. My second wasn't even born yet. She was born kind of in the process of that.
Mm-hmm.
But my son was very young. And it was like, I felt like I was beginning to do to them what my mom kind of did to me, or how I felt as a child. And I was like, oh no, I can't do this. Like, and don't get me wrong, I have an amazing family support system. So my mom knew that I was okay, right? My grandparents, my aunts, my dad, everyone was a great support for me. But it was still this, like, my mom has this business. I have to work there. I don't really want to. And like, oh, you're Delilah's daughter. Like, that's that was my entire identity kind of circled around that. And it really took for me to move to Atlanta, and for the first time in my life to only have like my life and my world of my family, my job, and to be able to do that on my own, right? Kind of in hindsight. I found that, well, actually, COVID happened.
Yes, COVID happened.
There were some major stresses around COVID, but there were some great things that happened during that time as well. And one that I appreciated the most, my neighbor and I would actually joke about it during COVID. Like, isn't it a great thing that we actually like our family, because we were spending so much time together. My mom lives about a mile away from me. She was going crazy because it was the first time in her life that she could not move around. And she is a person who spends her whole day outside of the house, moving around.
She likes to move around.
She likes to move around. My husband and I were trying to figure out something for her to do. We thought about like Facebook Lives, right? We were like, yeah, there's a big following. Like, let's just start doing this and we'll just have fun with it, right? No real agenda. We'll just have some fun. Her and I started hosting these Facebook Lives. And so we would do that every Tuesday night. And then people were so engaged with us that we started like cooking, or really she started cooking. And I was like moderating what she was doing. So it was basically like the expert, but then if somebody was the novice, like the background to it, because there are things that just happen that if you cook a lot, it. But then for the at-home cook or, the beginner, I was the person like talking through that. Mm-hmm. And through that, it sparked something like new in me. I was like, I really enjoyed this. Like, this is like a lot of fun. And it really gave me another perspective, like on the restaurant industry. From there, I just happened to drive past the Works property on Chattahoochee. And I'm also a person that loves like development and buildings and architecture. So I say, like, in another life, urban planning and real estate, I love buildings and just development and what's happening, in different cities. I stumbled upon the backside of the Works property. Chattahoochee Food Works was not open yet. It was under construction and the guys were in there, and I walked in and I started recording because it gave me chills. It reminded me of my mom's very first location. I called her and went to pick her up and then drove her back over there. And she felt the same way. And I said, we should do this. And she looked at me almost in shock because I had told her I would never do that. I didn't want any parts of it. And she looked at me and she said, if it happens, it is your business. You are going to do it. I am here as a support for you, but it is all you. I am retired.
I am not coming out of retirement.
I'm not going back down that road, right? I spoke with my husband and he was like, yeah, I think it's exciting. That kind of started our journey. And that was in 21.
Wow.
Actually, the spring of 21. Now here we are at the start of 24, and we just opened our second location up in Dunwoody. We have 2 locations in the Atlanta area right now. And it is definitely a lot of work. I think that I have done a pretty decent job with balancing, trying to be intentional about balancing. But definitely, I do believe that the work that I did at the school prepared me to be able to do this work.
I have questions around that. First of all, let me just say 2 things. One, Delana was the executive director of a charter school here in Atlanta. She was absolutely amazing. We were, of course, sad to see her go, but knew that, there were other things waiting. And then I also want to add Delilah's restaurant is probably one of the best soul food restaurants here in Atlanta. It's so hard to find good soul food, and Delilah's is a place to find it. Matter of fact, my mom and I are coming. We're having a lunch date there either this week or next week. We're very excited about that. But my question to you is, you mentioned that working at the school prepared you for this journey. What would you say are the two or three things that you took from that position and you feel like that's really helping you on this side?
Yeah. Number 1, finances. And number 2, working with staff. Finances, because I went to school, I got my graduate degree in business, right? But that was many years ago and all of the things and whatever. But really watching how a school, particularly a charter school, operates and the different committees, but definitely around finance and development and how you dig into financials, look at your cash flow, look at where your expenses are, how you're able to allocate for staff, what percentage you need to be around to make sure that it's viable, all of those pieces that people often don't associate with a school. A school is a business.
Yes.
And particularly a charter school. Being in the type of charter school where I was, you really were like an entrepreneur. We used to always say this entrepreneurial spirit, that's who we're looking for to be a part of the team there, because you don't have, now that the school's more established, it's there, but there wasn't really a playbook, right? So you have the charter, which is an overarching document, but then you have to know how to execute that. And what does it look like? Which is almost similar to a business plan, right? What does it look like? How do you know that you're going to be able to sustain this business? I would say that, number 1. And number 2, staff. All that happens with and around staff, how you hire staff. We had a very lengthy, compared to others, hiring process that I use pieces of that in my business. But it comes down to gut as well, right? You have these pieces, but to me, if it doesn't feel right, if there's a little inkling glimmer of something that's like putting up a hair for you or a little flag, that's something to dig into, or someone you may need to pass on, because I have seen over and over again that those little inklings flare up when
Yeah.
you have someone that you knew maybe there was like a question mark that you had about them. That did really help to prepare me. I would definitely say those are my top two.
Wow. Yes. It's so interesting. I had an interview prior to this one, and we were talking about intuition and gut
Mhm.
feelings as well. And that was one of the things that I have not been great at. I would often, when it came to staff, I would often talk myself out of that gut feeling
Mhm.
like, oh, but maybe that wouldn't be I'm
Yeah.
still learning, but yes, definitely got to go with that. I 100% agree with that. Tell me, how has it been so far? What would you say are your biggest challenges from a day to day?
Probably have two. One is not a challenge necessarily anymore, but I would say the first challenge when I was starting or when we were starting is was around working with your family
Okay.
and the roles that each person would play, right? Although my mom was like, she's retired, this is our business, it's still her name. It is her name. It is a brand that she worked to establish in Philadelphia, right? The name is very similar. The Delilah's part is very similar. That is her name. We call her quality control. That is the title that we have given her. It's much better now, but starting out, her and I were like bumping heads. And it really was around, I'm her daughter. And I think about this with my daughter. Like, no matter how old she gets, she's still my daughter. She's the mom. And it's like, I'm your mom and I know the right way, you know, kind of
Yeah,
thing. I'm like, I'm a grown woman and
I know the right way.
I've had a career and and I also know what I'm doing. Now we are good and it's she's still quality control and she will always be, right? And I
Right.
appreciate that because it is people pay for her to consult, to open up restaurants and whatever. And I get all of that knowledge and I've had all of that knowledge my whole life, right? The other part is, and you have this dynamic, is working with my husband.
Yes.
And he does not have a background in the restaurant industry, but he does have a finance background. But even with that, he is a more creative person. Then I am working with two very creative people. And although I am and can be creative, I am more like an operations type person. So I'm always thinking through logistics.
Right.
Whatever else is happening, I'm like, how is this supposed to look, flow, feel? That is like my role in the business. I would say number one, that was like, we had this idea, plan, etc. But then there was still the relationship dynamic and how that would look or possibly look differently from our personal relationship and our business relationship, right?
Yeah.
And I would say the second one, which is kind of an ongoing challenge, but I'm going to call it a rethinking,
Okay.
is we serve soul food. We serve Southern cuisine.
Yes.
And as you kind of mentioned, to us, there was a market for it, a need for it, and particularly to bring it into some spaces where soul food has not traditionally been,
Right.
right? That has worked really well for us, but there are also some challenges with that. We sell a from scratch whole food product. We do not open cans. We literally go, we buy the produce, we are stripping down the greens from the stems. which is a lot of labor. We are buying whole jumbo yams, like families would do at Thanksgiving time. We do every day, right? With that, there's a lot of cost involved. Due to the spaces that we are in, there's a higher cost involved, right? Yeah. Therefore, our prices reflect that cost. People who are not able, who enjoy the food, right, but maybe are not able to make the food, they don't have any issues paying the price. They will come all day long and buy it up and not question, or people who have had the product, and know that it's a good, high quality product, they don't have a problem with the price point. But we do have people, particularly people with our similar background, who are able to make the food, et cetera. And they come and they're like, why is this mac and cheese $12? I can go to my grandmother's house and get mac and cheese. And I'm like,
go to your grandmother's house. I mean,
our food is priced accordingly, right? And our mac and cheese I'll use that because that is a great example. We use 6 cheeses. Cheese is very expensive.
Yes.
We use eggs, milk, and butter. We don't use margarine. We use real butter. A case of butter is $130. The product that we're giving you is the best quality product.
And it's so good.
There's a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
We could cut corners, but that's not what we do. That's not who we are. It is a lot of conversation that we have on a daily basis, kind of like around what you're getting, right? And people will buy it, they'll enjoy it, and then they'll say, but I mean, it's worth $12, but I don't really want to pay the $12, but it was good. I'm going to come back. But I don't, like we just got a Google review. It's like, oh, I'm giving you 3 stars because I didn't want to pay the $12, but it was great.
Delana, when I tell you I get that more than you could even believe, because when we initially opened, it's actually waned a lot now. We don't hear it as much, but initially when we opened, I would say the first 10 years of business, we were, why does this cost so much? Why, as someone's carrying a Michael Kors bag or a Coach or a Louis Vuitton, that type of thing. But and I know if you don't price it accordingly, you won't be open very long.
We won't be open. And it is interesting. It's a little bit of a mindset part though. And that's because we're in a food hall. There are a lot of options in that food hall, right? We do very well, right? We're priced accordingly for our product. There's a certain markup. You should have about 33% of, off of your total cost. And that's what we have. We're not, 300% or anything like that. But I kind of like laugh inside because someone will buy, I don't know, a product that costs another vendor like $1 to make, and we'll charge the same thing that we're charging, but there's not an issue with it. It is a lot around that shift that yes, your grandmother can and does make this product and is probably amazing when she makes it, but you don't, because you may not be making it, know all that it took for her to make it, right? We show up on Thanksgiving and the food is there.
Right.
But it is expensive to make our food. And we're priced accordingly, and we have to be priced accordingly so that we can stay open and continue to offer our food.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. It's interesting because as I'm working through this past couple of months, I'm doing a series called Kickstart Your Business. And last week's episode, or the week before, part 7, is all around pricing. And I strongly believe that a lot of businesses fail because they aren't charging enough. We're in the custom clothing embroidery market, a lot of fraternity and sorority stuff. I have seen fraternity and sorority stores come and go, but it's because they're trying to be the low price leader. You're not going to survive being the low price leader. Walmart can do it, but it's because they squeeze the margins out of the vendors. Yes, that you keep charging your prices because I want you all to stay open.
Yeah.
And like I said, my mom and I are coming.
Thank you. So yeah, I would say those are two challenges.
Yeah, but you know what? I would also say truthfully, we're in a space now where I can cook collard greens, but I don't feel like it.
Right.
I don't want to.
Right.
And I know how long it would take my grandmother to cook those things, and she's doing all this. And yeah, I'm not doing all that.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why, and our other places not set up like this. We had the advantage at Chattahoochee Food Works to design our space. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons why we have the glass, because it's a little bit of nostalgia, right? Because you come by, and when we are preparing the food, you can sit and you can watch, and people take videos and kind of all of the things to see us make the food. You know, it's intentional around why our design is the way that it is. And the other part that we kind of have been publicized, but I share as our story, is we had the option to put in seats or not, right? And we made a counter that seats 8 people or 8 stools. And it is a little nod to my mom, because although she grew up in Philadelphia, our family is from Richmond, Virginia. My grandfather worked for the VA, and his job moved him to Philadelphia. All of our family is still in Richmond, Virginia. And my mom really had this struggle of growing up in Philadelphia and having equality in Philadelphia, and then would spend her summers in Richmond and would not be able to get served in restaurants. Yeah. And she tells this particular story that there was a drugstore in downtown Richmond where she would like to go with her grandmother to get limeades. And she went in and sat down, and she couldn't figure out why they weren't serving her. And my great grandmother, I call her my grandmother, but my great grandmother said, you know, Lala, like I've told you, you can't, this is not where you go. You have to go over here. We established that counter as like a space, right? And it's one of our like internal story.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's welcomed at this counter.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that, Delana.
Thank you.
And your mom, she's such a sweet spirit. And I know just from knowing her that the care that goes into her recipes and her food is just beyond any that I've seen. That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. Out of curiosity, because, you know, my goal is really to help people as they launch their businesses, want to get people over this 5-year hump of where 50% of businesses don't make it. How did you all go about funding your business?
Yeah, great question. It was all personally funded. Well, I will say it did help going into a food hall, because our startup costs were about $50,000 to design our space and, you know, get our equipment, et cetera, which is like a drop in the bucket to doing like a first gen build out, right? But the money essentially partly came from bonuses that I received from my job that I had. And then during the time that we were doing the Facebook and Instagram lives, we started selling sauce and rub as a distributor for someone. And we did that, and then we established our own sauces and rubs. The profits from those sales was the other addition to our startup cost.
Love it. So smart. So smart. What do you visualize for Delilah's in, let's say, the next 5 years? I know you've already opened a second location. What are your thoughts around the future?
Yeah. Future, I would like for us to continue our e-commerce around our sauces and rubs. We have the barcode on it to get it into stores. That is a goal of ours to get it into some of the stores and kind of expand that line. I don't like saying certain things out in the atmosphere too much, but I would like for us to open a standalone space outside of a food hall, but
Mhm.
still quick serve so that we're able to do like a little bit more entertaining in that space. That is also a goal. And we are working on getting our products outside of like sauces and rubs, but the mac and cheese and, our sides, etc., packaged. That
Oh,
is,
wow.
that's our next kind of step.
Now,
So
I know your mom was on a Netflix series, right?
Barbecue Showdown season 2. Yeah, it did really well. I think it's still on Netflix. She is one of the fan favorites based off of the ratings. The show was up for an Image Award, some stiff competition, but they were nominated for an Image Award. Yeah, she did really well. And she has been on a number of shows over the years. It's been some years, quite honestly, but she was on Bobby Flay's Showdown twice. She was on like Bobby Flay's Favorite Things and a few other like Food Network shows. She has been the spokesperson for Lactaid, working with Walmart on how you provide a healthier option, like cultural meals, but in a healthier way. Because
Okay.
the important part of doing that whole product is it's less processed, right? And so it has less sodium, all of the things. And so oftentimes people will look at soul food as almost like an unhealthy option. But if you really drill down and compare it to some of the other, items you may be buying, you'll see that it's not necessarily, unhealthy. So it really all is within that product, right?
Okay.
It's one of the reasons why, we choose the type of chickens that we serve, try to use halal meat and the less processed items. Yeah, long story short. So how you make like our food, but in a healthier way. And so that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to do.
Well, I definitely think like your social media is very helpful to your business. You mentioned the glass, and people can sit there and take video. And, I think you mentioned you are still an educator. And to me, that's part of it too, right? Educating about the healthiness of soul food, and also maybe combating the pricing people a bit around educating them on what actually goes into this. Because for someone to have to strip those greens off the stems, I can just remember my family doing that when I was growing up. That was like just for our family, that would take my grandmother, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on how much she was cooking, around Thanksgiving. Good gracious, she'd be there cutting
Yep.
a long time.
We do about close to 50 cases of greens a week.
Wow.
And if in a family's house, you're probably doing about a half a case if you're feeding a large, like a Thanksgiving meal.
Gotcha. Thank you for putting that in perspective.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Cases. How many noodles do y'all go through for the mac and cheese?
One batch, what we consider a batch of mac and cheese, is 10 pounds of noodles. And that will make us 4 long pans of mac and cheese.
Okay.
And we go through anywhere around, depending on season, 6 to 10 batches in about a week. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I know one day I came and Legend and I shared some fried fish and we were so happy. We were so, so happy. I just
Yeah.
want to say. And the fried chicken. Anyway, I can go on and on. I'm making myself hungry just sitting here talking about it. But another question for you. One of the things around this podcast is really about leveling up, leaving a legacy, becoming
Yes.
your own boss. When it comes to legacy, though, I mean, your mom, she has blazed the trail here of legacy for you and your family. But what type of legacy do you want to leave for your kids, grandkids, the community?
Mm-hmm. I've actually, what's interesting is I don't know, it's probably my age because I have like a major birthday coming up this year.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. But I've been thinking a lot about legacy, right? And I feel like my kids are okay and will be okay. But for my grandkids and grandkids, I want them to be able to, I want to say this, but with the caveat of like not being spoiled, right? I want them to be able to eat off of the work that I'm doing now, but with an understanding of the work that went into it, because my mom was also building off of her grandmother's, work. I want this brand to be able to pay them. And that's what I'm working for. Yeah.
The legacy. I love it. I love it. Well, I know you have sauces and rubs.
Yeah.
That's online, and this is a international podcast. So
Yes.
tell people where they can find that.
Yes. All of our website, social media, everything is Delilah's Everyday Soul. You can find us there. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I have to update my LinkedIn. I'm getting there.
It all takes time.
Delilah's Everyday Soul.
Love it. I know you've had quite the career as far as starting really young at 8, 9 years old, helping your mom, going into education. Now you're on your entrepreneurial adventure. I like to call it an adventure because, it's a lot happening. It is an adventure. What would you go back and tell your younger self if you could sit down with her and share? What would you share?
That's a great question. To always lead with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've always had a certain level of confidence, but to not second guess myself. And like, there's no one, and this is why I love working with children so much, because it's important for them to know that you are the smartest person in the room. No matter who you are in the room, in that space, you have something to offer. And I don't know that I heard that. And I don't know that a lot of people in general hear that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even adults, right? I think that's what I would tell myself. Like, yeah, always enter with confidence. Like, lead with confidence. You've got it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I like that so much. One person in my life that is probably one of the most confident people I know is my 9-year-old son.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I would agree. In a great way though.
yeah,
Right?
definitely. What I am trying to do as a parent though, is I don't want him to lose that.
Right.
And,
Right.
but I think sometimes as kids, we often have confidence that people either squash or we squash it or something happens that makes us feel less confident. I'm trying to figure out as a parent, I don't want him to be cocky, which sometimes his sister says, you're very cocky right now. But I do want him to continue with the confidence piece. I really like that. Thanks for sharing that. Well, Delana, this has been great. I feel like I could probably talk to you like a lot longer, but I attempt to keep these things at 30 minutes, which
Absolutely.
which is hard. But thank you for taking the time and sharing your story. And I will truly say, if you're in the Atlanta area, if you're visiting the Atlanta area, go check out Delilah's. The food is impeccable.
Thank you, Monica.
Yes. Thank you for joining me today, Delana. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Monica. This was fun.
Delana, thank you so much for being a part of Become Your Own Boss podcast family. Thanks so much for your insight and inspiration. One of the reasons I love talking to entrepreneurs is because they always leave me with profound takeaways from our conversations. There were several that I garnered here from Delana. Number one, perhaps the path you're currently on is exactly where you need to be. Perhaps it is preparing you for a moment to come. I can truthfully say, just like Delana, I did take a lot from my corporate career. Mine was primarily around systems and standards of operating procedure. But to hear that Delana took with her the skills of finance and effective hiring, both much needed aspects of entrepreneurship, I say all this to say, wherever you are right now, learn as much as you can so you can implement those skills in the future. Number two, never say never. I know this is a saying that we've heard before, but sometimes I think God finds us funny, or maybe he or she is a comedian. The things that we will never do, or we say we'll never do, or that we'll never do again, may just be the path we end up on. So never say never. Number three, this conversation with Delana did make me revisit thoughts that I often have around what will my kids grow up thinking about owning their own business. Will they try to steer completely clear of it, or will they jump into it head first? I'm curious. I wonder. I guess maybe I'll see in a few years. Number four, working with family can be a challenge. I know this firsthand working with my spouse as well. And my mom works in our business also. But having clearly defined roles is a great way to help with this challenge. Number five, just as I discussed in the Kickstart Your Business series around pricing, you have to be certain you are charging accurately for your product. Even if customers complain, you know your costs and you have to cover those costs and make a profit. So you can either reinvest into your business, pay great wages to your team, whatever the case may be, but you have to cover your costs. And lastly, lead with confidence. You've got this. I absolutely love that, Delana. Thank you for sharing that with us today. And I want you to take that along with you today. Lead with confidence. Thank you for listening. I'm grateful for you. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and share the podcast. You can see the links in the show notes for all of Delilah's Everyday Souls contact info, so you can grab their rubs, their spices, and if you're ever in Atlanta, be sure to check out one of their restaurants. I strongly recommend that you follow them on Instagram as well. And don't forget to click the link in the show notes to join the Become Your Own Boss Facebook group. Remember, now is the time. Now is the time to level up, leave a legacy, and become your own boss.